Hi, this is Ren,
This is Casey.
and this is All Walks of Film.
We just read and watched The Killing Joke back to back.
And I will admit, we were a little bit late on this.
A little bit, not that late. The Killing Joke just came out this Wednesday? Last Wednesday? It's been like less than 2 weeks.
Right, but we didn't see it on the opening
We didn't
cinematic premiere.
We didn't because in our area it was on a Wednesday night. And it was only one day, and that was it.
Also, we were in a point where we couldn't afford it at the time. So.
Yeah, but also it was one day only on a Wednesday night. I don't know if it was like that nationwide, but in our area, that was definitely the case. So I don't even know what to do with that. But we've rectified the situation. So we were both very impressed with the comic book.
Yes, the comic
it's
book
Alan
was...
Moore. Like, what are you gonna do? And really, in terms of feeling, my feels, it felt like a very brief Alan Moore story. It felt very Watchmen. It felt very V for Vendetta. It was a very... This is the bizarre thing about people saying that Alan Moore's work is unadaptable to film. I truly disagree with that sentiment for all of his comics because his comics are extremely cinematic. I read his comics like a movie. There are beats, there's pacing, there's, audio looping. It feels like watching a movie, but on a piece of paper, it speaks volumes to his talent, and I also think it shows a certain lack of creativity with film studios that they can't look at that and see how simple it is. They have to make it a little bit more convoluted.
Right. There were times during this film that I thought if you just literally copied what the Alan Moore comics did, which, to be fair, you can't just owe it to Alan Moore. You have to owe it to the artist of the original
I agree,
comic.
and to my eye, I have not fact-checked this, but this looked like it was the same illustrator for V for Vendetta. But I don't know if this is true. I have no idea. But to my eye, it looks as though Alan Moore most likely does storyboarding. I believe he probably does storyboarding to set the pacing, because in the 3 works of his that I've read, V for Vendetta, Watchmen, and The Killing Joke, they all have very similar physical structures. Physical comic formatting that I would believe he was very responsible for. It feels very much like a signature.
So the artist behind Batman the Killing Joke worked on Wonder Woman, he worked on Animal Man, and did some other works as well.
He worked on Judge Dredd as well.
Okay, so
he worked on some Batman. He worked on one Wonder Woman.
So he's had a handful of work that he's done, but...
He's worked on a little bit of 52. Ugh.
But unlike Dave Gibbons or some of the other artists
so that's
Alan
not
Moore,
the same artist. The artistic style looked very similar to me.
I think that's a style that Alan Moore is fond of. So I think he picks artists that, adhere to his vision.
Yeah, but if you look at Watchmen and V for Vendetta, the artistic style is very different. But the formatting is very much the same.
Correct. He does like doing small panels throughout, unlike a lot of modern comics that have less panels on the page.
Right.
Granted, compared to manga,
it just feels like a frame by frame by frame by frame,
right,
which is really interesting. And there are 2 moments in particular that I wish they just literally copied and pasted. And one I'm going to reserve for now because I'll bring it up later as a separate point. But one was the roller coaster ride. There is part in the comic that's a montage where it's bam through the roller coaster doors, but through those doors, it's not the next segment of the roller coaster. You see Batman. Batman's on the trail. Batman's trying to figure out what's happening. He's trying to get there. It's like, bam, Batman. Bam, Batman. And I like it for 2 reasons. 1, it feels very cinematic. There's a beat. There's a pacing. And 2, it leaves a lot to the imagination. We've seen 2 separate things of what the Joker is convinced is going to drive Commissioner Gordon insane. But then we're withheld from 3 other things that we don't get to see what he sees. And there's a certain amount of tension with that. So when you do see Gordon, you really don't know if he's crazy or if he's not. I think that's really interesting. And I feel that that was a missed opportunity cinematically. It feels like that should have transferred from paper to film so easily and very well. And I feel like that was something that they really missed out on.
So right off the bat, I have to get this out of the way because this was a big controversy with the film coming out. The film addresses Barbara Gordon and tries to flesh her out as Batgirl to a certain extent. Also, of course, the notorious sex scene that is not really explicit in the film, but you know it happens.
Yeah, and I feel like this is definitely what we need to address right off the bat before getting into everything. In the comic, that is the wrong part. I use quotations on wrong in terms of from a progressive standpoint, because she is only in one scene and she is used as an object to hurt a man. You know, she's used as an object to hurt somebody else. She doesn't have her own agency in this storyline. And even though it's part of her origin story as Oracle, she is very much removed from the entire story. You know, there's this scene where she's with her dad and they're having a nice time and the Joker comes in and he paralyzes her, he debilitates her, she's in pain, he undresses her and she's naked and he takes photographs of her to imply that she has been raped. And there is some ambiguity in both the comic and the film, which I think we should get into, about whether that actually happened or if he just staged it that way to give that impression. And that is her entire purpose in the storyline. That is it. And like she is like the definition of, you know, a refrigerator girl. And I feel like this idea, I was initially very impressed that they were like, oh, so if you're going to pad out this short story into, you know, over an hour and a half movie, yeah, that is a smart idea. You take Barbara Gordon and you make her more fleshed out before you debilitate her. You know, you put her story foremost, and maybe not foremost, but you bring her as Batgirl before you turn her into Oracle so you can have a full story arc with her. And I am not a Batgirl fan. I've seen her in like a couple things that have given me the impression that she's very much just like Girl Robin. She's just never really impressed me. Like, I always thought she was fun, but whatever. And this movie really makes me want to read some Batgirl comics. Oh my god, she is What do you think? Do you think she was, like, awesome in this?
I thought she was very good, but then again, I have a bias towards, like, Nightwing and some of the other stuff with Dick Grayson later on. So that's me. But as far as what she had in the movie for the brief time that she had, yeah, it was interesting. I would like to see more of that. Obviously, based on the plotline that was given, we know that Batgirl becomes Oracle.
Right, and I like the fact that they fleshed her out because I feel like a lot of newcomers or like more casual comic book fans, which is sort of where I'm at, are familiar with Batman, we know Batman. We're familiar with Joker, we know Joker. Batgirl, not so much. We might know like she's around, but I don't think I don't really have a good view into who she is. And based off of this, I want to know more. She was awesome. She was kicking butt. She was fighting like a boxer, which was really cool. She was very smart. She was able to hold her own. I really like that she was able to admit to herself when she was vulnerable and protect herself. That scene where she's with Paris and he has, you know, sprayed her with the stuff that's going to knock her unconscious. She admits that she is in a vulnerable position and she locks herself in a bank safe to keep herself protected. I thought that was awesome. You know, she's not like stubborn-headed to the point of she's gonna get herself killed. You know, she's not stupid. But she's a very capable fighter. And I like the fact that she has like her own personality. I think she might be my new favorite if this is sort of what she's going for. And with the sex scene, I was initially kind of like, oh god, are you serious? Especially after reading the comic, I was like, no, why? But I like the way they handled it. She was an adult with her own sexuality, making her own choices. She was not a child that was being infantilized and taken advantage of by Batman with his many girlfriends and female conquest. That's not what that scene was at all. And it was very much not centralized that much. It really wasn't. It was something she wanted and something she took. but it wasn't something that they lingered on or something that they really like made very titillating. It was just something that happened that she called the shots on. And I was okay with that. I really didn't... If this isn't very true to her character in the comics, I could see that pissing people off and I wouldn't know. But I was totally on board with that scene. That was okay.
And to be fair, this graphic novel abandons a lot of things that we know about Batman, about the Joker, about a lot of characters.
Like what?
The whole failed comedian thing and...
That was in there.
The thing with his wife. No, I'm saying as far as the Batman universe goes, there are different interpretations of his backstory. I mean...
Yes.
The Tim Burton movie, which is not canon, but had him as a mob boss that then got thrown into a vat of acid and he became the Joker. And there are other iterations. I know that currently there's supposed to be 3 versions of the Joker. One's a crime boss, one's somebody who's complete bad shit, and one's like a goofy jokester.
This is based off of Matt Pat's film theory video. And it corresponds with like the silver, bronze, and modern age of Batman. It's just sort of a template of these different interpretations we see of the Joker as like some sort of broad generalizations. Because like any given superhero, and this is the hard part of adapting superheroes, is that almost every superhero ever has multiple interpretations. And it's really up to individual fans to figure out which one they particularly like. That's and then when you adapt it, it's really hard to either bring all of that into one character or to just pick one and abandon the other ones. Either way, you're going to have a really tough time.
That's one of the reasons why I like the Chris Nolan movies, because they captured the essence of the characters without fully adapting the characters. And I think that's a better way to interpret. Now, granted, that is not faithful, truly, but it is one of those things
It's an interpretation, and that's okay. I don't see anything in particular against interpretations. And just as a plug for a future video, we're planning on doing one that's adaptation versus interpretation. So stay tuned for that one. I disagree with you in terms of Batman. I agree with you in terms of a lot of other characters with the Chris Nolan movies. They are interpretations of like the essence of different characters. I definitely disagree with that about Batman himself. But in terms of a lot of other characters, especially the Joker, and I would include Harvey Dent as well, they're definitely getting that essence in there, even if it's not on paper to screen, truly 100% paint by the numbers, adapted. And I think that's okay.
I would disagree with you mainly because the Chris Nolan Batman movies try to tackle the balance between Bruce Wayne and Batman. And that's one thing that the comics haven't done a lot of. You don't see a lot of Bruce Wayne in the comics or other iterations in the animated series. You just get
true.
You just get a brief moment, like usually.
That is not true. One of the best episodes of Batman the Animated Series is purely Bruce Wayne. It's Bruce Wayne going through like... It's been a long time since I've seen this episode, so I may be a little bit wrong on the specifics, but it was basically him going through a nightmare where he is living through what his life would be like if he never turned into Batman. That entire episode is focused on none of the villains, none of the other secondary characters. It's just Bruce Wayne. Who is he on the inside without Batman? Which is really interesting, and I would love to see that as like a feature-length movie. I think that could be really, really cool at some point.
Okay, to be fair, there was another series that just focused on Bruce Wayne as a character, and that was Batman Beyond. Because in Batman Beyond, there are only brief moments where Bruce Wayne gets into the cowl.
Okay, that's interesting. That's really interesting, because he's been trying to get me to watch Batman Beyond, which I do want to see. It's just not something I grew up with. I grew up with the animated series.
I grew up with the animated series as well, but given
you
that
had more television than I did, I was very limited television exposure. So
right, so you got to watch it.
I could get.
Well, you could watch it on DVD and stuff like that, and I was limited to what came on TV. So
yeah.
It's a much different experience, and yeah. I do actually need to get back to the animated series and actually watch it through.
I do too, because I could only just watch it when it came on TV, the very limited times I could be on TV. So I've never sat down with the animated series and like watched it episode by episode. I've just seen bits and pieces.
Yeah, and when I watched it, it was Batman and Superman, so like... You never know which one you were going to get at sometimes, where it was like sometimes you would get Batman.
I want to see the Superman animated series because I am not a Superman fan. But I love the Batman animated series so much, and there's some crossover. Like, one of my favorite second or tertiary characters is Roxy Rocket, and she has been in both of them. So I almost kind of want to watch Superman just to watch her. I want to see the episode where she's in it. I fucking love Roxy Rocket. She's the best. She's not the best, but she's awesome.
I think you would have a newfound appreciation for the Superman series, mainly because the Superman series focuses a lot on the tertiary characters like Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and all that kind of stuff. Superman is the boring character. Whereas,
that's why I don't like him. Yeah,
but like Metropolis is a very interesting city, and it's interesting to have Superman as the Deus Ex Machina, and everybody else kind of working around it. Yeah.
Okay, I probably will like it for that reason. I just really don't like Superman because he's boring. He's Jesus. I get it. It's lame. He's this all-American country boy, boring, and he's like this perfect superhero, boring. Which is why like. There's a kernel of an interesting idea in Zack Snyder's film where it's like, let's talk about how he's fucked up. Let's talk about how he's an alien among humans. Let's talk about how he doesn't fit in. Let's talk about how he feels different. Let's talk about how he could be a threat to humanity because he's not one of them. But they push that aside for all this other bullshit. But theoretically, I would love to see that movie. That's what the Tim Burton, Nicolas Cage Superman film was supposed to be, from my understanding. But, I mean, let's be fair, the entire concept is way too silly. I don't think they could have done that concept justice either. Even though that was, like, really old school classic Tim Burton, who was, like, the outsider dude. Like, can you really imagine Tim Cage?
Also, apparently, the producer behind that movie, like, was obsessed with spiders.
Oh my god, the spider thing! Kevin Smith talks about in, like, I don't remember if it's An Evening with Kevin Smith or An Evening with Kevin Smith 2, Evening Harder. But I think it was the second one. He talks about how he was working with this producer who really wanted to put a giant spider in the Superman movie. And he couldn't do it. It's like, Kevin Smith could not make that happen, which is why he was fired. And then that producer went on to work on The Wild Wild West with Will Smith. And he got
which had spiders!
Spiders in it. Just to backpedal a little bit. The Batman animated series is my favorite Batman. Like, that's where I'm coming from as a DC fan. That is my favorite. That is my interpretation. That is what I like in DC. That is what I like in Batman. That's what I like in the villains. That's what I like in the artistic style. That's what I like in Mask of the Phantasm. That is my jam. That is my, like, niche of DC that I am particularly interested in. And it's because I grew up with it. But that is my bias towards DC as a franchise. And it's also a big part of the reason why I'm really not feeling the New 52 at all. From what I've read. I'm going to continue reading New 52 just so I know. I might be proven wrong, but from what I've read so far, that's really the reason why I'm not into it.
My experience with Batman was, like, The Dark Knight Returns. It was...
Which is awesome.
Nightfall, which I would love to see an animated adaptation of that graphic novel series that could be great.
Mm-hmm.
And... like The Long Halloween and several...
The Long Halloween is so good.
Yeah. So that's a lot of my experience because those were at the library. And
again, that is still the same sort of dark, gritty interpretation. And not dark and gritty as in solemn and dull, like the Zack Snyder films, but like really edgy. Really pushing the envelope of what you could do with the medium, especially one that was really aimed towards kids, quote unquote.
Just remember, we're on Marvel's paycheck.
Right. The other thing is, I am a big fan of the Batman, or of the Tim Burton Batman movies, because I grew up with those as well. I think there's a lot of really good points to them, but you do have to accept it as an interpretation, not an adaptation, and one that is pretty far removed from the source material. That shit about Tim Burton never reading a comic book, though, is complete crap. That was such a bullshit line for him to say, because A, if you watch the first Batman, not Batman Returns, you can see he's a comic book fan, as much as he wants to be like, no, I'm not some stupid nerd. No. Yes, he is. And two, he has a fucking blurb on the front of The Killing Joke about how it's the best comic book he ever fucking read. And that's what got him into comics. So, fucking Burton. You're such an asshole. I love you, but you're such an asshole sometimes. My God.
All right, so back to the film.
Back to the film. We started with Barbara. Here's the problem. Because there's a problem. The feminist in me and the progressive in me is like, You fixed the girl in the refrigerator. You made her an awesome person. I'm starting to really dig her. I like her. This is cool. And I like that they have a story that with her and Paris that parallels Batman and Joker later. I thought that was really neat that they're trying to get this dynamic where they are more similar than they are apart. She's not just his kid student. She is on his level. Not really, but like she's getting there. She's getting better.
And to be clear,
some of the stuff he has to deal with personally.
And to be clear, the Paris that you're talking about is literally a guy whose name is Paris France.
Yeah, Paris France. Not to be confused with Paris, France. Totally not. Oh my god. But here's the problem. That interferes with the aesthetics of storytelling, and I don't like that. As much as I like what they did, you can't put progressivism in your film at the sake of your storytelling or your aesthetics. It can't be at the expense of your overall product or your overall piece of art. And most of where this comes into play is the perspective. Because you have the first act of like essentially 3 acts from her perspective, and the movie starts with her voice. And I thought it was kind of goofy, this whole thing like, oh, I bet you weren't expecting to hear from me, Batgirl, tee-hee-hee. Whatever.
Yeah, you were expecting to hear
from Batman.
Yeah,
because you read the comic.
Yeah, you read the comic, and there was no narration from Barbara Gordon, but now you get it.
Did you get it? I thought that line was weak, but also this was another reason, like this was another example of them differing for the comic from the worst. Is this meant that they couldn't include any narration from Batman or Joker later in their story arc, which I felt was a missed opportunity, and I feel like there's no reason why they shouldn't have a mixed narration. There are multiple protagonists at play, there are multiple points of views, and that is something that as a film, even more than a comic, they could really play with, and they really didn't do that. They just focused on Barbara for a little bit, and then pushed her aside, and then focused on the Joker, and then had their conclusion with that, and then went back to the Barbara for a little bit so they could tie up that loose end, and not piss me off personally. And it doesn't feel right as a complete story. And I felt that that's something they really needed to work some of the kinks out of.
Well, it's like they were going to directly adapt The Killing Joke, which is the part that you get after the Barbara Gordon part. It's a direct adaptation of The Killing Joke. But then they threw that in pretty much just for the sake of...
Yeah, they just tacked it onto the front. And one scene at the end. And I really feel like they needed to play around with timeline. They needed to play around with some narration. Get more of an organic feeling in the storytelling. And I really feel like they needed to have that narration that they had at the beginning of the comic. Where they had it with Batman and switched to Joker. And it was kind of like a twist, like a little pivot. And you could have still had that when you switched from Batgirl, Barbara Gordon to Batman. You could have had this readjustment period that would have made it feel a lot smoother.
Also, you could have changed the perspective in the scene where Batman goes to visit Barbara in the hospital, where it's looking through the eyes of Barbara.
I agree, because it feels too much like she is brought in and then pushed off, and it's not her story anymore. And it needs to feel like it's everybody's story. It's a community.
Well, and it's hard because you're adapting a work where it's Batman and the Joker, and then you throw in this character who really is just a small part of like a larger whole. But the way you set it up, you establish her as the main character and then throw her to the side.
Exactly. That's why there needed to be a mix of narration. And I feel like as long as I'm going to push the envelope and just be like, oh, well, in my fantasy movie where I'm directing, there should have been more too with Barbara and Gordon's relationship. Even little bits. Because this movie was very good at establishing a lot with very little. There were 2 throwaway lines in the movie that were not in the comic that I thought were amazing. That I thought was a really good change. And it was one of the mobsters. They were basically Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Tweedledee and the Joker talking about his act. Like, Tweedledee will say something offhand, and the Joker will be like, ha, that's funny. And Tweedledum will be like, no, it's not, it's cliche. You know, it's the throwaway line like that really establishes why he's a failed comedian. He sucks. He has a shitty, 3-year-old sense of humor. That's why he sucks. That's why he failed. That puts an entirely new layer to his story that you don't get in the comic. I feel like there's no reason why you shouldn't put something that subtle but that effective in a lot of other areas when you've illustrated that you have the skill.
Also, if you're going to adapt this story into something bigger, it would have been nice to see the Joker do his act.
Yes, I thought that was the comic, but lines like that made me forgive the movie for not including it for that reason. And the other thing that they added, that setup in the storage locker with the dead corpses.
That was awesome.
That was super awesome, but that adds into that like little layer that you don't get to be a part of why he sucks so bad and why it eats him up inside that he fails at what he loves the most. It really, really gets you there in a very subversive way, because I feel like if they fed that to you, I feel like if you actually saw it, it could dampen the mystery of the Joker, especially because they're giving you a lot of information about his backstory. Like, the appeal of the Joker is always like he's mysterious and you just don't know. I think having this inner layer of what feeds into his self-loathing, not that he fucked with his wife, not that he fucked up his baby, not that he couldn't make this other life happen that he wanted, but for himself, he sucks. And he hates how bad he is. More than everything else. I thought that was really, truly amazing filmic storytelling. And I wish that they had done more of that with some other elements, because that was really masterful.
But I think they get into that later on when the Joker takes his inversion of his hatred towards his humor and then says, well, the world is a big joke. Why aren't you laughing? I think that feeds into it. And
I definitely agree with that.
That's an interpretation that, like, I feel
it's the killing joke. Yeah.
I feel so terrible about not reading this earlier, because everything that I thought I knew about the Joker is wrong. After reading this graphic novel, and then, well, I wouldn't even...
What do you think that you knew about the Joker, then?
I had theories about the Joker, but my theory was that I did actually have something close to that theory, where I thought that, you know, the Joker was a man that was solid, and then he broke, but that's partly because I knew about the whole, like, comedian thing. But I will say that, like, I had the interpretation that the Joker was just a wild card from the get-go.
You just don't really know. He's messed up in the head. Kind of like Rorschach, where it's just like, even as a kid, you're just fucked in the head.
Yeah, and the Chris Nolan movie, The Dark Knight, really feeds into that, because...
You just never know with his backstory. You just don't know.
Yeah, he says one thing, and then he says another thing, and...
You're just left unsatisfied, but in like this, I need more kind of way.
Yeah, and there have been some interesting theories online. I think the Wounded Soldier one is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much validity it has, but like after seeing some of the arguments, I actually kind of like that theory.
Well, you would.
Being somebody who was in the military, yes.
Yeah. I will say I had very mixed feelings after reading the comic of like, oh, this wasn't like nearly as huge and phenomenal as I expected. He was a boring guy who was very mediocre, and then he changed, and like that's it. And then like the more I thought about it, I was like, well, that's really fucked up. And you know, they get into that with the comic where it's like any normal person is just one bad day away from being as fucked up as me. You know, that is really kind of scary. A lot more scary than, oh, something big and dark and dramatic and like lifelong and prolonged happened to him, or he was just born different and you don't fucking know. That is really interesting and makes him a lot more sympathetic, and I feel like the film really tapped into that feeling and expanded it a lot. But there's still two scenes with the Joker that needed some meditation. Like, there needs to be like a lot more time given to it. And one was when he finds out that his wife is dead. Like, that is so not even a thing. The only reason why it's a thing in the movie is because the gangsters might kill him because they think he snitched.
And this is one of the things that, in making an adaptation, sometimes it's one of those things where you might read it at a certain pace, but when you're actually showing it in a film, there are moments that you need to linger on. And this was definitely a moment that you needed to linger on.
Yeah, you don't feel his pain at all. And his pregnant wife just died. He was doing everything for her. He was going to sacrifice his morality. He was going to put his life on the line for her. And that's just all gone. And you don't feel anything for it because this movie just doesn't settle on that at all. You know,
Yeah, it was just moving through plot points. It wasn't actually giving you that moment where it could actually elevate that scene possibly even better than the graphic novel. I've seen this done before.
I agree. Like, I want to compare it to Prince of Egypt. There is a scene after he speaks to God where he comes back and he is talking to his wife, and he's trying to tell her what he's experienced. And it's all done silently, and the music swells, and there's a lot with body language and facial expressions for both of them. He's serious, and he's scared, and he's animated, and he just doesn't know what he's experienced, and it's bigger than he can imagine. And she is just, like, taken aback. She doesn't really know whether to believe him at first, but she trusts him, so she's sort of like, this is a lot to tell with no dialogue. You can do it. And in this film, they delete the conversation between the Joker and the copper when he's telling her that his wife died, and he's distraught, and the copper doesn't give a shit. He's just like, I'm sorry to break it to you, but whatever, I see this every day, this is Gotham, fuck you. They deleted that entire interpretation of that situation, and it was just a one-on-one conversation. And I get that the reason why they didn't reveal anything there is to build up that tension about whether or not the gangsters were going to kill him, but I feel like that was a really weak payoff. I feel like that would have been a great moment for him to really truly express his inner anguish. And you don't get that, and then he comes back and he explains to them what happened, and it breaks the tension because you're like, oh, well, they're not going to kill him. And you're too relieved with that to really take in his wife and child are fucking dead. He has nothing to live for anymore.
Yeah, and then, once he takes on the Red Hood and gets thrown into the vat of acid, we have this moment where he loses it. And in the film, it is not earned.
It's not earned, and in the comic, it's much better.
And the biggest problem that I have with this moment is this is possibly the most iconic frame in comics, period.
But also in terms of just this one particular story, this is the turning point of the entire storyline. This is the most important part of this story. Like, this is everything. And it's just glossed over in a couple seconds. I don't even think that scene lasted, even half a minute. It felt very brief. It didn't feel genuine. It was very glossed over visually. And then you get that one picture. You get the one still shot, but that's it. What's one picture in a film? This is one of those things that really... This is one of those things you needed to not copy and paste. This is one of those things that you really needed to truly feel and explore all of it. It needed to be very sensatory. One of the things, they cut part of the reveal. They shortened it from the comic. Why? Because in the comic, he's sitting there, he's looking into the puddle, he takes the helmet off, he's looking into the puddle, he's taking in what he looks like now. And we can see his reflection, and it's kind of muddled and murky. There's a build-up in the comic. And in the movie, he looks into a puddle, and he laughs, and he takes his helmet off, and you don't see the reflection. And he's laughing, and he's getting up, and then you see his face, and that's it. What the fuck is that?
I mean, so many moments like that just feel like they were just going through the beats, but they weren't actually interpreting them and really taking on the emotional weight of each scene.
Mm-hmm. Which, again, they've illustrated that they have the skill to do that, and they chose not to. They chose to take a weaker standpoint. They chose to make weaker decisions.
And I will say, just as a side note, this movie made $3 million in one day.
A little over that. It was $3,777,000 something.
One day during the week on a Wednesday.
Yeah. People want to see this shit.
Exactly. So
people really care about this particular story.
Yeah, so why not give the people truly what they want to see? Why not get better animators? Because, the animation in this film was shoddy. I have seen much better animation.
It's not shoddy. There were too many people and too many artistic styles to be cohesive.
And there are ways to do it right, but those are usually, minor stories where it's one cohesive whole, but it's like little bits and pieces. Gotham Knight is a perfect example because like sometimes it's anime, sometimes it's like, yeah, it's different.
To go a little bit off to the side, even look at the Laughing Joke, or the Laughing Man, the little Joker fan-made movie where they chose to do one particular flashback scene in stop motion. I mean, I felt like that scene should have extended to the entirety of the flashback, but it was made for a very artistic decision that worked very well in terms of storytelling, which is not the case here. This was very much we're on the floor, we gotta get it moving, we gotta push it out there. I think they needed more time on this movie.
They
really
definitely
felt
needed
like there
more.
was too tight of a deadline.
And I think that's hurting DC, period, on everything. They are rushing everything. You know, their movies, and like Marvel took their time. Now, granted, they're pushing things out now, but they took their time at the beginning
to build up to this point where they can push it out. And you're right. Look at the Avengers. As much as I don't really care for the Avengers, and I don't really care for the Marvel MCU, you had this
I'm cool if the Rousseau brothers are behind it, because the Rousseau brothers know their fucking shit, and they actually interpret action scenes in ways that are smart, interesting. They take concepts of powers and combine them, so like characters are actually playing off each other's powers in really interesting ways.
What did they work on? Like, what specific movies are you referring to? Because I'm not familiar.
Well,
with
Civil War, and
I assumed, yeah, the Civil War. Okay.
Civil War and Captain America: Winter Soldier. From all I know, those are the two films that they've worked on. And they are now taking over the Avengers, which is
because they've proven that they can.
Yeah, they've proven themselves better than Joss Whedon. Watch, seriously, compare them to the Joss Whedon films. The Rousseau brothers have better, and the Rousseau brothers are also in charge of adapting The Warriors, the 70s film, into a TV show. And I'm kind of...
Are you on board with that?
I'm kind of excited about it only if it takes place during the 70s, because you take
that story outside of the 70s. You can't take it out of context.
Yeah, also, like, here's the one rule of the film: no guns.
Right. Which you really can't do if it's not the 70s.
Yeah, especially modern day. Like, they'd just be dodging everybody else's bullets that weren't gang members.
But going back to what you're saying about the Avengers, as a lifelong, diehard Joss Whedon fan, I completely agree with you. Like, I can't even argue. You're right. But yeah, with the Avengers, I'm not a fan of the Avengers or the MCU, but they were much more intelligent with their decision. Even Cartman from South Park recognizes this. That's how true this really is. You take one character, you give them a couple movies, you take another character, you give them like 3 movies, you take another character, you give them a movie, you do that with all of them. Everyone's familiar with these different people. We know who they are. We get into it. We know their personality. We know their life. We know where they're coming from. We get their dynamics as individuals. And then, once everyone is nice and familiar with everyone else, you put them together in a story where you can focus on the plot and the action, and you can have fun with the characters that are already established. DC is doing the wrong thing by taking like 5, 10, 12, I don't fucking know how many characters into each movie, smushing it in, trying to establish all of them at the same time, and have a plot, and have some action, and let you get to know the characters, but you can't really have fun with it because you have to establish story, and you have to do like a lot of exposition, and it's stupid.
Also,
and
you don't need
work, and you don't need to do it. I don't think DC fans really want that. I don't think we're like so ravenous that we need the next movie in 5 months. I don't think we need that.
Also, we already know like half the goddamn backstories.
Right. Do we need to see Batman's origin story again?
No, fuck. All you gotta do now is show a fucking pearl necklace. You gotta show Bruce Wayne holding a pearl necklace. That's all you gotta fucking do now because everybody fucking knows it now.
No, you're right. What if the opening was you see the blackness, you see the pearl necklace, and you hear the gun bang, and it's blackness, and you see the pearls fall on the ground, and adult Bruce Wayne wakes up. It's like 15 seconds, including slow motion, and you're there. You've got the storyline, you've got the background, you know who he is, we're fucking done. It doesn't have to be 10 minutes recapping everything again in slow motion.
Now, I could say that, like, you know, introducing some characters like Green Lantern, possibly even Diana Prince.
And not this fucking Selena Kyle knockoff bullshit.
Yeah, but like introducing characters that are a little bit less known as far as like backstories goes. Like everybody knows Wonder Woman, everybody knows Green Lantern, but do they know like
Diana
who they are?
Prince. Because people know Wonder Woman is an Amazon, and she met Steve Tyler, and she decided to fight for the humans. But a lot
like
of
the stuff with Zeus and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
like
people, and by people, I mean not comic book fans. I mean normal, boring, not nerd, not comic book fans, average moviegoers have enough of Wonder Woman to know that much. You might not know that Diana Prince worked her way up from being a World War I war nurse to being a military executive, which I'm pretty damn sure is not what they're going to do with her origin story at all, because of, if you look at her in Batman v Superman, she's just Selena Kyle. She goes to, these fancy, upper class soirees, wearing pretty dresses, looking at artifacts, and playfully stealing things in front of Batman and dangling them in front of his face. She's trying to be Catwoman, which is dumb because Catwoman and Wonder Woman and Selena Kyle and Diana Prince are nothing alike. But the normal, boring movie-going audiences know Selena Kyle, and they know Catwoman, and they don't know Diana Prince yet. Which is a wasted opportunity for DCU to just completely gloss over all that shit and pretend like, oh, well, just to appeal to like the boring people who aren't into comic books, here's the thing that they already know. Instead of doing something new.
Also, they made the mistake of introducing her character like that without introducing how she became...
like a socialite or anything?
Yeah. It's one of those things where they're like backtracking now, where they've established this and then they're like, oh, hey, like back in the past, I don't know how the timeline works. I don't know if she got like frozen like Captain America did, but like, how is she fighting in World War I and now she's fighting here? Like maybe
because she's an Amazon and she's immortal. And during the 70s, there was a period of time where all of the Amazonians went into an alternate dimension. And they, like, took all their mystical powers with them, and she didn't have powers anymore, and she could only be, like, a normal, boring human being. That's really interesting, but I doubt that they're going to do anything close to that.
So being somebody who doesn't know that much about Wonder Woman, so you're saying that Diana Prince does not age?
She didn't for a long time because she was immortal and she had superpowers. And then there was a period of time where she was mortal and she didn't have superpowers. She had to go out kick-ass style and just be, like, a normal, plain, boring human being fighting crime, because that's how dedicated she was to humanity and humankind. Which really speaks volumes about her characteristics, her loyalty. I'm gonna go a little bit. People are gonna kill me. I'm sorry. I feel like it proves her patriotism more than anything Captain America has done. And I know Captain America has punched Hitler in the face. But that's how much that Diana Prince cared about humanity. Was she became mortal and still fought for everybody in America. That's pretty damn cool.
All right, so back to Batman.
It's
the Killing
hard
Joke.
because there's so much cool stuff in the DCU, or not DCU, but the DC comics and the whole DC franchise, which is not to piss on Marvel because they're just stylistically very different. But I'm a DCU nerd. Not a nerd yet. I'm getting there.
Well, I will say that people are drawn to the DC characters, generally speaking.
I feel like
the
it's
big
because...
two. The big two, they're drawn to Batman and Superman more than anybody in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or Marvel Universe.
And here's the reason why I think
changing, though. That's changing now.
Because the DCU is fucking shit up.
And the Marvel Cinematic Universe has built itself for
a year and a half?
No, the Marvel has
Marvel.
built.
Sorry,
yeah, Marvel.
DCU. Yeah,
Marvel has built themselves up for, I want to say, almost 10 years now. So they.
I want to say since 2011. I'm not quite sure if that's true.
Since Iron Man. Since Iron Man, which came back in 2007.
Yeah, because I'm thinking of the Avengers. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're probably correct. I don't know. I haven't followed Iron Man that well, so I'm not sure.
And they've tried with Spider-Man. They've tried over and over again. Right now, I do like Tom Holland. I do think that Tom Holland...
But Homecoming is such a dumb title. And they're going back to the same... Again, like, if we have this problem with Batman, I'm going to apply it to Spider-Man, too. It's part of the reason why I really wanted them to switch to Miles Morales, so we can see something fucking new. I am so goddamn sick of Peter Parker being in high school, moving in with his aunt and uncle, and the uncle dies, and Aunt May is in danger, and he's in love with some hot chick across the street. I'm fucking sick of it. God
okay,
damn it.
to be fair, the Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't even go over the uncle's death because we already fucking know.
You're basing that off of one movie.
I'm basing that off of one movie, yes.
Where he is not the protagonist.
But I think this is continuing on because
I don't think so, because the actor they hired is too damn young. He's going to be a teenager, which means we have to go over his fucking origin story again.
I don't think they're going to do that.
I don't know, but I think a big part of the reason why a lot more people have been drawn historically to DC over Marvel is because Marvel is very superheroes, and DC is very the dark side of humanity. You know, every character is very humanly flawed, which is part of the reason why Harley Quinn from the original style Harley Quinn is one of my favorites. She is a great example of a truly flawed human that you can relate to. Batman, especially, is like that. Joker is like the opposite side of the same coin in terms of his flawed humanity. You know, which is why in The Killing Joke, this theme of him being the only one that's fucked up and him needing all of humanity to recognize how fucked up we all are inside, but won't admit it, but other people having this integrity that he just doesn't have, really rings strong for some people. You know, I think that this is a theme in DC that people really feel.
To me, my favorite version of the Joker, which The Killing Joke alludes to a certain extent, is the Joker in another universe with things slightly altered.
Like the Flashpoint Paradox, which they really need to make it into an entire movie. Oh my god, because the whole thing with Bruce Wayne's parents was too good to be a tiny little side plot in one animated film, even though Flashpoint Paradox should be a mini-series, where they take like a full episode to go through each different plot that they had in that movie. That would be amazing. That would be so cool. I would sign up for that.
So, continuing on, I think with things altered, the Joker would be absolutely fascinating. You know, if you change things, in another world, the Joker is Batman.
Right, or this even goes back to that episode of the Batman the Animated Series that I told you about. That whole episode was about what if things were the same but slightly different. You know, I think DC really tackles a lot of issues of how circumstances can shape us. You know, there's who we are on the inside, and there's who we are with our own humanity and our own identity, and then there's how much of that isn't within our power. It's all outside of our control. It's all what happens to us. It's what other people inflict on us. It's not who you are.
It's what you do that defines you.
Exactly. You know, that theme, that needs to be like the theme that everybody puts in their pitch for any DCU product, except for possibly Lego Batman. I'm gonna give Lego Batman a pass, but that really should be the theme of every DCU or every Batman property.
Yeah, well, Lego Batman it's a spoof parody.
Yeah, so that doesn't have to apply in that case. But I think other than that, every Batman franchise should have that as its underlying theme. Do you think that was present in the Killing Joke film?
No.
And that's the problem. I really think that's the problem. I think they were too busy trying to fix what didn't work in the comic, which is commendable, to get at that nugget of truth that lays in the Killing Joke with the Joker's backstory.
I think that's a problem with a lot of Batman stories, which is that Batman just kind of is the force to be reckoned with. Kind of like with Superman, which I just said. Like,
that's what makes Superman boring.
But you're talking about one character. Right. I'm saying the Superman universe is great. Same thing goes with Batman. You know, Batman is the least interesting character in a very fascinating world. Mm-hmm. I would like to see that changed. There are interesting stories of Batman that exist.
See, I disagree with you because I think that in stories that are not about Batman, Batman is the weakest part. You know, every time like there's a story about the Batman villains and you get into like 3/4 of it and then Batman has to come in just to save the day, you're just like, oh man, Batman, we were having fun. Can you go away for like 5 more minutes? We were having a good time. But then in the episodes and in the moments and in the storylines that are focused on him as Bruce Wayne or him as Batman and what that means, I think those are excellent. I think those are amazing. But I do think that there needs to get to be a point where you actually root for Batman over everyone else. And I have really yet to experience that.
I was really bummed with this film because I found out that one of the people working on the script was Brian Azzarello. Mm-hmm. And he was the guy who wrote the Joker graphic novel.
Oh, that's so good. That's really good. I bought that, and you tried to convince me not to buy that, and I'm like, it's a work of art. I can't not get it.
It's one of those things where I really appreciate where it's going. I think it is actually the inspiration for the Heath Ledger look. Was it the inspiration for the Heath Ledger look, or was Heath Ledger the inspiration for that look? I need to double check on that one.
I did too, because I'm not sure time-wise when that book came out.
So overall, I think that as an adaptation, it didn't work that well.
I think the problem was the adaptation was okay and the interpretation didn't work. I think that their idea of needing to fix this and this were good ideas and they had really good creative solutions. But I think that there really needed to be more time to work out a lot of these details. It really did feel like they were under too tight of a deadline and they couldn't artistically do everything as well as they wanted, and writing-wise, they couldn't do everything as well as they wanted, and pacing-wise, they couldn't take their time. Everything felt very squished and condensed, and like they needed to cut corners in some parts. And it's hard, because I feel like everybody's heart was in the right place, and it felt like this could have been 6 out of 5 stars. It really could have been that good. And as it stands, I think it's excellent. I actually was very impressed with this film, especially as an adaptation. But as an artist myself, and as somebody who studies this for fun, I can see it. You know, I can see these weaknesses, and it makes me feel sad. It honestly just makes me feel bad for them.
And before we forget to mention this, we have to talk about one thing that was left for interpretation in the book.
Two things. The first, chronologically, being, was Barbara raped at all? And the second being, did Batman kill Joker? And just real quick before I forget this, what the fuck is this R rating for? I mean, I know that they say, oh, well, there's bloody violence and, you know, graphic implications, but like, dear God, this shit was tamer than Mad Max, and it was an animated film, and the MPAA, for the longest time, just called anything animated G. It didn't matter how, like, sexual it was. They were just like, oh, it's animated, so G. So what the fuck got this an R rating? There's no cursing, there's no gore, there's nothing shown, there's nothing even implied that much. Everything is very pushed off to the side and done a lot less edgy than the comic, which is kind of lame. There's no reason to make this rated R. What the fuck?
All right, so I am going to include everything that IMDb says it's rated R for.
Which, by the way, is a tip I taught him because I started looking this up when I was like, what the fuck are these ratings, man? This shit's funny.
All right, so first, we have a section, sex and nudity. And
these sections apply for any time that they give a rating. You know, sometimes they'll put sex and nudity and they'll be like, none, and that's why it's rated PG. You know, something like that.
All right, so an implied sex scene takes place briefly. A woman is lying on Batman, kissing him. She then removes her shirt, and her bra is seen before the sex scene ends.
Okay, let me just say, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you? You can't even call her by her name? You can't at least call her Batgirl? Like, fuck you. She's not just like some random woman. What the fuck?
All right, next is Commissioner Gordon is stripped naked and put on a ghost train. No detailed nudity is shown, so his dick ain't hanging out.
His dick ain't hanging out. You don't even see his butt like you do in the comic. I thought this was kind of a shame, because...
it's less humiliating.
It is less humiliating, and I kind of want to get into this. I wish this wasn't the case, but there is a certain embarrassment that American media consumers feel when they see somebody naked who has less than a model body. There is a certain amount of embarrassment that we feel, regardless of what our body type is like, when we see somebody who has a fat ass and a pouchy belly and is out of shape and doesn't look that good without clothes. And as an example, look at Watchmen. Either the movie or the comic, it doesn't matter. You know, Night Owl, it's a little embarrassing watching him be naked in front of this model hot chick. You know, because he is not a model. But there's something that can connect with you there. And I feel like there needs to be a lot more of this in media. You know, we've gotten there in television. We haven't gotten there, but we're getting there. There's a lot more really gross male nudity in terms of, like, flabby butts than perky, hot female tits. And I feel like this should be pushed further to include everybody, period. But there is some humanity to seeing that, and that's what makes us embarrassed. And I think that that's something very primitive that could be tapped into that they failed to reach by excluding it and by sort of blurring it out artistically because it was animated, or like putting things in front of nudity. And I didn't like that.
I think you need to watch a little bit more of Girls, because Girls does tackle that a lot. Because
Girls tackles that, and Broad City tackles that, although...
Well, Girls has explicit nudity from Lena Dunham, and Lena Dunham does not have... Lena Dunham
is still hot.
But she doesn't...
You're right, she's not a model.
Yeah. She has weird tits, too. I mean, like...
Yeah, but she's still kind of hot. Broad City is like that, too, where they're not, like, conventionally attractive, but I still honestly kind of think they're too hot to really pull off that, like,
but does that have explicit nudity in it?
It does have explicit nudity in it.
It's not blurred?
It's not blurred. At least not when I watched it. And it's very human. It's not sexual. There's this great scene where Abby's roommate has moved out, and she's so excited that she's singing Lady Gaga naked in her apartment, and it's just this tracking shot of her being naked and, like, running around, and it's great. It's a very human moment. But I think that the girls in Broad City are honestly too attractive for that to be as unconventional as I could have
sworn I saw that scene that was completely blurred. So
maybe it was. Maybe it's my imagination, but I felt like there was no bush, there was no labia, but there were tits and butts and whatever. Maybe
Girls,
I'm wrong.
There's all
everything.
Yeah.
Okay. And I do want to get into Girls, for the record. That's, like, on my list.
All right, so some mild to moderate sexual and crude references throughout.
No breasts are shown ever. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so the next one is the Joker shows photos of naked Barbara Gordon to her father. No breasts are shown.
So that plays into getting an R. What the fuck?
All right, next is violence and gore. A woman is shot in the pelvis by Joker and is shown shooting out.
It might be that they're trying to edit this stuff in order to not have spoilers, but they have a feature on here where there's, like, a spoiler section and it's all redacted and you have to click on it to see it. So I don't think that's the case. I just think this is really bad writing where they don't even know who the fuck Batgirl is.
Yeah. As a result, she is permanently paralyzed. She is later sitting in a wheelchair, donning her new persona known as the Oracle.
Which, I don't know how that plays into violence and gore, but, like, also, it's a big red puddle. There's nothing explicit. There's nothing gory.
A man is shot in the head and blood sprays out. Batgirl punches...
That was, like, 0.3 seconds.
Batgirl punches a man repeatedly in the face. Her hand then has blood on it.
Which I liked because there was a scene earlier where this mob boss falls on top of her and she pushes him back, and I was like, oh, I bet she would get, like, glove on her or she would get blood on her gloves and it would be incriminating later, and that didn't happen, and I was like, okay, suspension of disbelief. And then later there was that blood and I was like, oh, you were just trying to build for later, and I like that.
Some mild action fight sequences throughout.
Mild being the key word.
The final fight ends as Joker fires the gun, only to find out it not working.
Which, that is G level. And also, that was one thing that was adapted from the comic that worked better in the film. That was so funny. I couldn't stop laughing because the little flag falls down and it says click, click, click. And he pulls the trigger and it's click, click, click. That was so funny. That was a great joke. Oh my god.
Yeah, and there's one I have to add that wasn't even included in this one, and that is when there's the explosion on the boat, you actually see a severed hand fall into the water.
Oh yeah, that was like the most gory, fucked up thing that they included.
They don't even include it in this one, so I find that funny.
And I still say nothing in this is as shocking or graphic or disturbing, as vague a term as that is, as Batman The Dark Knight Returns Part 2. There's no reason for this to be rated R. That's garbage.
Profanity. The following profanity is used. Hell, damn, ass, 1 use of bitch, and 1 use of goddamn, and about 2 uses of Jesus.
There's more. Effin' instead of fucking, bull, and BS instead of bullshit.
And this is rated R.
And this is rated R. There's no reason for... And there's one time where I couldn't tell if he said shoot or shit. I'm pretty sure he said shoot. But yeah, there's like no language in this.
I think they were pressured because some of the thematic elements to make it R.
There's implied rape, possibly. We're not even quite sure. Maybe.
Except what the prostitute said, which, implies it a little bit more.
Well, we'll get into that, but yeah, there's no reason for this shit to be rated R.
Alright, so alcohol, drugs, smoking. I always think this is stupid, but we have to include it. Some drinking and smoking in a bar scene. Back in the old days, you saw this in Disney movies.
Yeah, you saw this all the time.
Alright, frightening, intense scenes. This is the darkest animated Batman movie. What is this grammar? This is the darkest animated Batman movies ever made.
No. I'm just going to disagree. No. No, it's not. No.
Yeah, I would say that The Dark Knight Returns is a lot darker than this.
It's so much darker. It's so much more messed up. It's much more violent.
Yeah, it's PG-13.
It's much more disturbing. Yeah. This is crap.
Yeah, the whole thing where he's like beating
Everything
Joker to a pulp, and then he's like,
"Why?" Everything that happens in the Tunnel of Love is shocking, genuinely shocking.
All right, a man is stripped naked and forced onto a hellish ghost train ride to send him mad. No detailed nudity is shown.
So rated R.
Joker's presence and transformation is disturbing and scary. This is not a kid's movie.
Bullshit.
I'm finding the ratings that I'm seeing hilarious now because of like what the certifications in other countries.
Yeah,
Canada.
Argentina is 16, Australia MA 15 plus, Canada PG, which is what it should be in British Columbia, Canada G in Quebec, Chile TE plus 17 or plus 7. So 7-year-olds can watch this. Finland K through 16, as in kindergarten through high school.
I don't know what that means.
I'm pretty sure that's what it means, but that's just my take. Germany, 16. Ireland, 15. Netherlands, 6. I would say 6 years old, but maybe not. Poland, 18. Singapore, NC, 16. Seriously? Korea, 15. Sweden, 11. UK, 15. US, rated R. What the fuck? This shit is tame, and this shit is a lot tamer than the comic.
Yeah, I mean, well, especially with what's going on now. If this is rated R, like, we can't get the stuff where, like, the Joker has his face taken off and all this crazy stuff that's happened.
This is ridiculous. That'll all be not rated, which is ridiculous. Or NC-17. Can you imagine? It
will be not rated. And to be fair, like, The Watchmen, Tales from the Black Freighter is gory as all hell.
Yeah, but this was not gory, period.
No, it was tame. I think that there were thematic elements that they just said, we can't put this in a PG-13 movie because, kids will watch it because...
I don't agree. I really don't agree. Even if you take into account implied rape. Are you telling me you've never seen rape or implied rape in a PG-13 movie? Fuck, Maleficent was rated PG, and that had all sorts of implied rape shit going on.
Same thing goes with Snow White and the Huntsman, which...
Maybe it was PG-13, but I'm pretty sure Maleficent was somewhere in there. It sure as hell was not rated R. Okay, but getting back into it, the two things that are kind of ambiguous is, was Barbara Gordon raped? Did that even happen? My inclination from the comics was to say no. I kind of get this feeling from the Joker, sex doesn't do much for him. He's so out there and weird and kinky that I don't think that sex does anything. I think that might be too boring for him. But in this movie, nothing is added to the scene with him and Barbara. Nothing is shown in the photos. But there is an added scene that was not in the comics where Batman goes up to a bunch of prostitutes and asks them if they've seen the Joker. And they talk about how weird it is that they haven't seen the Joker because as soon as he gets out, he runs straight over to them to have a good time, as if that's more important to him than being a criminal. Which doesn't make any sense to me knowing the Joker.
Well, we don't know if the Joker has sex with prostitutes. Because there are many cases of prostitutes having clients that do nothing sexual to them.
That's a good point. I mean, the chick does very suggestively say, like, have a good time. And
I get what you're saying, yeah.
And in Suicide Squad, they made him way too overtly sexual, but usually my go-to point is the story Mad Love, where Harley is running around in front of him in a little nightie talking about, like, you want to rev up your Harley? Vroom, vroom. And she covers herself in pudding, and he just does not give a fuck. It does nothing to him. He feels nothing. Because he's too preoccupied with all this other shit that's way more important than something like sex, which is more of, like I said, being very animated series inclined, feels a lot more like the Joker to me.
One thing that I always thought was interesting about the Joker is how much power the Joker has, how much influence he has. Do you think that sexual influence would be off balance for the Joker?
I think it would, because in my experience, and I know that there's a saying that there's no way to limit things to two of any, but in my experience, there are two kinds of misogynists, like women haters. One are people who objectify women, and one are people who don't even register women as existing. They don't register them as human, they say women, and they feel nothing. They don't see them. And I feel like that's the kind of person the Joker is.
I don't think the Joker is a misogynist, because I don't think the Joker views things in, like, a sexual order.
That's what I'm saying. Like, okay, that could feed into what I'm saying.
Yeah, because maybe you're making it explicitly about, like, females women and stuff like that, and I think the Joker just manipulates fucking everybody, because
I think you're right. I think you're more right than I am, because maybe the thing is that he doesn't see Harley Quinn as any different than any of his other henchmen.
Also, she's too easy. She wants him. Easy.
Exactly, yeah. And, he just pushes her around in a very similar way that he pushes around any of his other henchmen. There's nothing special about her, and the fact that she's a woman and that she's sexual doesn't change that to him. I think you're more right than I am on this one, for sure. But I can't see the Joker going up to prostitutes to party or to fuck them. I just don't see that. Especially in this iteration where, like, most of his backstory revolves around his dead wife. Like, if you look at the way that Mr. Freeze has immortalized his wife and he's changed his entire way of life because of her, he does it to immortalize her and to, like, serve her memory. And the Joker is doing it to get away from her, but I think you'd have kind of like a Colonel Ty thing from Battlestar Galactica, where, spoilers for Battlestar that has not been warranted, so plug your ears and sing la 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 if you haven't seen this, but even when his wife isn't around, he sees her everywhere. Every woman is his wife. That is his mind. It's a one-track mind, and I feel like if the Joker had any inclination towards women, it would probably revolve around that more than I want to get my rocks off. It just feels very weird to me. And I don't really like that this movie tried to make a more unambiguous slant that he did rape her, and then not have Barbara say shit about it, not have Barbara be affected by it at all. Bullshit.
I have one theory that could possibly work.
Okay.
Perhaps the Joker isn't behind it, but the Joker has a lot of guys helping him. How do you think that he gets guys to help him? Do you think that would be off limits to basically say, I will get you prostitutes, I will get you women, I will do all that kind of stuff? Do you know how many people can be manipulated by something that fucking simple?
I would agree with you, except for the dialogue in that scene does not apply.
No, I'm just
like he's going to them personally.
Right, but I'm just saying.
I totally see that happening.
I'm just saying, like, with all the fucking henchmen that this Joker has, like,
yeah, he could just be like, you'll get a chick and it's fine. Yeah. I could definitely see that happening. I don't think that was their standpoint in this case.
Right, because, I mean, the way that I see
that's a better take, yes.
The way that I see the Joker as something that you obviously can include in, like, kids' films and all this kind of stuff is manipulating people by, offering women.
And you could change that so easily. You could just be like, oh yeah, he always comes around with his boys right after he gets out. That would be so easy.
Women, men, if that's what they're into. Drugs.
Yeah. Give them drugs, give them money, give them women, whatever. Those are, like, the three things that people want on, like, a stupid, superfluous level. Yeah. So, I mean, this film seems to imply that more without going into what that would mean. And I think that's kind of bullshit. But I also think it's really bullshit that they gloss over her injury. Completely. She wakes up, She doesn't give a shit about the fact that she's paralyzed. She doesn't give a shit about the fact that she might have been raped. She's thinking about her dad. Sure. But there's never her struggling through physical therapy to get into her wheelchair. She goes from being in the hospital to being, like, perfectly well adjusted. There's no struggle. There's never her hurting. Which sucks, because she's the one who's been physically hurt. And as we've seen, Gordon's sanity is fine. I also think that there should be some of Gordon trying to recover from all the shit that was inflicted on him. As long as you're trying to fix the original story, you could put sort of an epilogue where it's the two of them trying to recover from what has happened to both of them. And that's really how I would play it up. And those would be very different experiences.
Right, and the movie kind of dug its own grave for this part. They started out making an expanded adaptation, but they didn't stick to it. And I think that's the biggest flaw that the film has, because there's that thing at the beginning, and then it's essentially just word by word, not frame by frame, but word by word, action by action.
Some of the things have been slightly altered or redacted, yeah. But it's essentially, yeah, it's pretty close.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen with some iterations that it copies the style and everything like that. And this movie doesn't really copy the style of the graphic novel that much.
I really wish that if they're going to adapt it, that they had also adapted it with the original coloring and not the recolored edition. I really think that that would have been better, because besides the fact that I think that the original edition is much more artistically and aesthetically beautiful than the recolored edition, I think that would have been a really good way to promote the original style. And I also think that just would have worked better in a movie than maybe it did on paper. You know, you could have a lot more movement with the very bizarre psychedelic colors, and I think that would be really interesting, and they didn't do anything close.
I think part of the problem, too, is they're not selling that version.
No, they're not. They're selling the more well-known version, which is the recolored version.
And the recolored version adheres more to modern-day comics, which I have a problem with, just because it's a piece of art. Just leave it as is.
Yeah, you don't publish an encyclopedia as a recolored version of a Van Gogh painting. So moving on to the actual ending?
So in the end, the Joker is trying to manipulate Batman to kill him. Right.
Sort of. I don't see that that's how it played out. I think that's something that could be open to interpretation.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it's finally come to this moment, my life or yours.
And they've both laid it out.
And in the graphic novel, Batman grabs the Joker's throat.
And we see that.
And it just kind of ends on that.
And we don't know. We don't know what happened.
And the movie decides to end right before that.
Maybe not. I don't know. Because what we see, the Joker tells this joke, which also plays into this whole thing of how he's a really shitty comedian because of the way he delivered that punchline, which I personally liked. I liked that he delivered the punchline and then gave it a little bit more, so you don't really get it. I kind of like that. But he gets the punchline and he starts laughing. And unlike the comic, Batman starts laughing with him. Almost Batman does a show of solidarity.
He does laugh though. Batman laughs, but it's more in the comic. It's more to try to trick Joker.
Right, and you see him place his hand on the Joker's shoulders, very squarely on the shoulder, and the camera pans down, and there's a rain puddle where we see no reflection, we see no implications of movement. We don't see anything. If you don't have the sound on, nothing's happened. Nothing's happened. They just stood around and told a joke and laughed, and that was it. But the Joker's laugh stops, and Batman continues laughing. And that's supposed to be your implication from the comic. Which is another way where it's just really dulled down from the comic. You don't even see the visual. I feel like if you haven't read the comic, you might even miss the auditory implication there. I really think you would. I think it's too subtle.
Well, and that's one of the things. This film doesn't understand the comic as well as it thinks it does.
I don't know. I kind of don't feel that way. I don't feel like I saw a Zack Snyder film where I'm like, damn, you just missed the point.
No, it's not that it didn't miss the point. I think that it was trying too hard to recreate what the frames were saying, but that the people behind it didn't take the time to think of the implications given.
It still sounds like you're trying to describe a Zack Snyder film, and I don't feel like that's what this was, because there were scenes where they really did understand the heart of the story. They just didn't follow through with it like they needed to. And I don't know who to blame for that. I don't know if it's because maybe there were too many creative voices involved. I don't know if the deadline was too hot. I don't know if there was some studio involvement to try to dumb it down for the sake of the ratings. I don't know who to blame here.
Do you think they were
somebody knew what was right and something happened?
Do you think they were trying to push for PG-13 and then
they got this R-rated and they were like, fuck?
Well, I think they tried to make it R-rated after Deadpool, so it's they're trying for a PG-13, then they're like, oh, we can do a couple more things because, Deadpool was successful, and because that's when it came out that it was going to be rated R. It was literally right during the same time that Deadpool was so successful.
Maybe they were very much trying to do PG-13, and after that they just sort of retroactively were like, we'll rate it R so more people will come see it. That could very well be what happened. But it feels like there was something besides the storyteller's intent that got in the way of the way the story was told.
So, what do you think?
Overall, I think it's very good. It could have been great. There is this nagging dissatisfaction with unfulfilled potential.
To me, it felt like it was a slave to the material without trying to do its own thing or really linger on moments. And I think that ultimately made it very mediocre. This film...
You felt it was mediocre?
Yes, I did.
Wow. So we feel very differently about this film then. Because I would give this about 4 stars out of 5.
I would give it about 2.5.
Whoa! I didn't think you disliked it that much. I'm a little taken aback. Wow. Because you seem to be enjoying it. There were a lot of parts where you were laughing, where you were kind of like, whoa, that's cool. I mean, sometimes I was like, whoa, wasn't that cool? And you were like, yeah, it was cool. So maybe that was why. But
the sum of all parts doesn't equal the whole. So, I mean, that's my thing, because I've had that with some movies where... We also
had that problem with the dance number. And I'm with you on this, but I felt dissatisfied with the dance number in the comic and in the movie. Or not the dance number, the song. The song.
Yeah, it didn't really land.
I don't think it landed in either case. I think that was very much a miss. Which sucks because I think that the tune of the song is very nice. I like the lyrics a lot.
I believe V for Vendetta came afterwards, which it seemed that's
what I brought up. Yeah,
it seemed that scene, it even has the top hat and everything.
Oh, it was very the vaudeville scene where V tortures the man with all the baby dolls into insanity. But that scene worked much better in for Vendetta.
But it seems like that is a more realized version of what was in this. So Alan Moore kept that idea and then further adapted it into...
And the other thing that happened in V for Vendetta was there is the musical sheet with the song playing. So you can really get a full sense of the music. And there was no sense of that. In the comic, for a little bit, I didn't really realize it was a song at all. And then in the movie, there was a certain lackluster performance element to it, which maybe they were going off of the fact that the Joker sucked as a comedian, so he sucks as a stage performer. But that was him in his previous life. The Joker tells funny jokes. In his evil alter ego. He tells some jokes that are fucking funny. The part where Barbara gets shot is disturbing, but he makes this joke about how, she has this psychological condition where she thinks that she's a coffee table book. And then Jack does a hole in it and the spine is damaged, and I thought it was hilarious. I thought that was super fucking funny. And now that's the warped sense of humor of the Joker. I thought that was, spot on exactly what the character needs to be like. And I felt like this whole vaudevillian show tune thing really needs to amp it up to more of a, don't hate me for saying this, you haven't seen the fucking movie, but more to, maybe not a Chicago level, but at least a Cabaret, the film level. Well, Cabaret is more realistic, and there was a certain sense of realism with this film. But it should have been at least up to there in terms of, production quality for, a musical number. Even you made that complaint where you were like, wow, I wish that this was more vivid.
It's one of those things that I get so frustrated with modern animation. It's the fact that they don't take full advantage of the fact that they're animated. Which, like, you know, you look at things like Aladdin, you look at things like, I mean, like animated films from the 90s where, like, characters' heads would, like, become huge and then you would have, like, things rotating around them. Because it's subjective reality. Like, they're not trying to fully recreate something that you would see. And
it could have been a magic show instead of a vaudeville act. And that could have taken more advantage of the animation medium.
Exactly.
Okay. I could definitely see that working a lot better. Yeah.
Or had, you know, Jim Gordon have hallucinations or something like that.
Yeah, if he was given, like, some sort of poison gas that made him see his worst nightmare, and he was coming sort of, like, in and out and in and out.
Yeah, because this is an adaptation. You don't have to do exactly what the comic did.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah. I think that there could have been some stronger creative decisions made. You know, my teacher told me this, and I think it's a really good motto. There's no right and wrong choices. There's stronger and weaker choices. And I think that there were a handful of stronger choices made and a handful of weaker choices made in terms of variating from the film, or from the comic.
Yeah, and I will admit that the comic is very short.
I like it a lot.
It's great. I do find it funny that whenever they distribute it, they have to include other comics because of how short it is, but...
That happens with a lot of things, though. Like, a lot of comics are this one famous story and another story, or this one famous story and 5 other stories. You know, that happens. I like it because I feel like I feel a little bit more rewarded for how much money I spend on it. I'm kind of like, if I'm going to spend $20, $23, $25 on one book and a comic book, yeah, give me 6 different stories.
I see that happening a lot less now because it's like now you have to read the expanded universe and then this story blends in with this story and then this story blends in with this story and then you get people coming into the comic store and they're like, where do I start?
That was me, yeah. It's hard. It's hard for, like, burgeoning nerds. Well, burgeoning comic book nerds, anyway.
Yeah, so let us know what you think of the film. If you agree with us, put it in the comments below. If you disagree with us, put it in the comments below. Definitely. I know that this film was very polarizing when it came out. So,
and it's polarizing with us, apparently. 4 stars versus 2.5. Wow. 2.5? Really?
I didn't hate it, but, like, 2.5 is a lot better than what other people would give. 2.5 is average for me. 3 is good.
What's another film you would consider, like, 2.5? Didn't you give, like, Family Guy 2 stars?
Yeah, Family Guy was 2 stars.
And I was like, I can't believe you gave it a whole 2 stars.
It made me laugh sometimes. So, it's one of those things where it's like, my reviews for things, it's like small things.
So this is...
like, bring it up.
This is, like, an inversion of The Witch. Although The Witch, I feel like you thought that was, like, 4.5 stars, and I thought that was, like...
Yeah, whereas this film, obviously polarizing. But it's partly based on the material that we read, and also just the missed potential.
A big plus for me was how much I really liked Batgirl. Like, this really motivates me to pick up some Batgirl comics. I'm really interested to see who she is now, because to me, it doesn't feel like she's a knockoff of another character.
Another frustration that I have with this, me personally, is the animation itself.
I agree. With a lot of DC animated films, and we've clashed on this before, where you think it's great, and I'm like, I like the animation quality, but the artistic style is not up to standard for the comics.
But the animation quality in this one, like I'm talking,
the animation quality was poor.
Yeah, there was literally a scene. There was literally a scene where Batman almost moved like a South Park character. I'm not even joking. I was watching it going like, what is this?
It also wasn't only that it was poor in certain areas, it also was that it was the artistic style and the animation quality were both wildly inconsistent.
Yeah, I mean, like, Barbara Gordon was well animated.
There were parts, I'm pretty certain that the same animation studio that worked on Death Note worked on this movie. Yeah, I have a really good eye for animation for animation styles, and I can usually pick up when animation is borrowed from other studios.
But then there were other parts where it was like on par with amateur Flash animators.
Considering how much artistically they were able to get with My Little Pony, I think that can be a little bit offensive to Flash animators.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen absolutely gorgeous stuff on Flash animation.
Yeah.
I've seen stuff that would rival any animation movie studio.
And again, I'm going to say My Little Pony, which, say whatever the fuck you want about the quality of the show. The animation quality in that pilot episode is stunning for Flash animation.
And I've seen fan-animated Batman stuff that was way better. There was a Batman versus Terminator animated thing that I saw.
That sounds awesome.
And the animation quality was really fucking good. I will give a link to it in the description below, because you should definitely check it out.
I feel a little sad that it didn't take me all the way. But I think it tried to do a lot of really good things. And I feel like overall the intention was in the right place.
I think it was purely trying to adapt a graphic novel and not really thinking about... I mean, it was a slave to its material. And I think it hurt it in the long run.
I think some of the parts that it hurt was when they were trying too hard to do the right thing. And I think a part of that might have been its aversion to violence. Because there is a certain social justice progressivism that is very adverse to on-screen violence of any kind, or on-screen nudity of any kind, and I feel like that did hurt the storytelling.
Yeah, on top of the fact that there was a scene where Batman was like, I don't want you to be objectified, and I was like,
oh my god,
Batman.
Fuck you. Batman was kind of a dick in this movie in a lot of parts, and that was definitely one of them where it's like, he's objectifying you. You don't know what he's doing. And I kind of like this whole thing with Barbara playing with her stalker, because that is a very human flaw that I, in particular, can't really identify with, but I can recognize. She's trying to manipulate this guy, and she doesn't quite know how, but she has this sort of instinct to do that. And I don't think this film plays that up like a good thing, but I feel like it feeds into a flaw of hers in a more human way. And I like that. And fucking Batman has to step in and be like, no, Daddy's pissed. Don't mess with this guy. He's objectifying you. You don't know. Fuck you. I was kind of worried that this film might take this very stereotypical storyline where the overbearing, protective man warns the strong, independent woman not to do the wrong thing, and she's too stubborn to listen to him, and she does the wrong thing, and then she regrets it. Like, at least they didn't do that, because that's, like, some of the most fucking backwards-ass taming of the shrew shit ever. That is my very long-winded, ridiculous feminist rant about that movie. I've seen that a lot, and it's garbage. At least this film didn't do that.
Alright, so let us know in the comments below what you... Thanks for listening.